I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here and glad to have you along. We expect several guests to join us, but I see my friend Angela Rose Myers is here. Angela, I've been talking about you, and there's yourself and Jamie. And just so you know, me and my friends have been saying how amazing you are and how clear you are and how powerful and concise your analysis and commentary has been. So I just want to pass those compliments on to you. And I told people that you come by it naturally because your mom and your dad and your lot of phenomenal leaders, thinkers, educators, and so what else could you be? So good to see you, my friend. Yourself,
Thank
how you
you.
doing?
Pretty good now that my speaker is on. Thank you, Al. Hello, Vanessa. How are you, Angela?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for, your kind words, Mr. McFarlane. I'm just so peachy. Thank you so much.
Well, it's just so it's refreshing, Angelo. You were on the program with Dr. B and the Dr. Williams, I think, last Friday when we do our healing circle, and I can tell you that the people that were there were so impressed and so pleased and so invigorated, so inspired by you and by your intensity, your fierceness, but also your vulnerability. You were just clear and plain, explaining, the how you were feeling in the wake of the sentencing of Kim Potter, and also sort of creating an approach, an analysis of that sentencing in the context of our experience, in the context of your and our commitment to activism. So we looked at both, the mandate of the movement, the bid for freedom that we both have inherited and have embraced as mission work, but we also looked at ourselves as individuals and were reminded by Dr. B and others that even warriors have to rest. I think that was the word she used, and that we have to take the time to monitor and heal ourselves as part of the work of nation time, of building community culture, building, serving humanity, serving our family. So all that was great, and good advice, I think. But I simply think it's also appropriate that Al McFarlane acknowledge Angela Rose Myers and you individually, but also you representing that spirit that is abroad in our culture and in our community. What you're doing and what I am doing, what yourself is doing. We're not one of a kind each. We represent uh, armies, I think, uh, dozens, hundreds, thousands, and millions on the planet who are equally um, uh, charged with being and creating change. And so it's in that spirit of being part of a common movement that I continue to salute you. Yusef, what's on your
Well,
mind, brother?
well, I want to tailgate on what you just said, Al, because the old folks had an expression that I think is appropriate to Angela Rose Myers. The fruit don't fall far from the tree. And if you know Sam or Sheila, Angela's parents, I've known Angela since she was a little tiny girl,
Yep.
and have been to the house, have had the real privilege of working with her mother and father. Her father and I co-authored a report on home ownership in communities of color called the 5030 report. And her mother and I have served on boards of directors together. And we can sleep easy at night, Al, knowing that there are young brothers and sisters like Angela who are filling in the ranks, because
Mhm.
the first responsibility of leadership is to train your replacement. And you and I have always believed that the only things we keep are the things we share. So, Angela, I think you know that if there's ever anything that I, and speaking for Al, that we
Mhm.
can do to assist you in terms of the reality that we face in our community, you have but to ask, and that's an unqualified invitation, an invitation can be respectfully requested or respectfully declined. But here's where I'm coming from. Our people are basically on at least 4 levels. The first level are those who understand what time it is and are prepared to commit their lives to change and liberation of Black minds. The second group understand what time it is, but they consider anything that they contribute to the collective diaspora of Black people as extra personal or self-sacrificing. If they don't get a nickel more an hour in the pay envelope or their picture on the front page of a white paper, they don't have time for it. The third group are the majority of people in our community who live day to day, hand to mouth. And I think every morning that they can get up and look in the mirror is a celebration. And it's largely comprised of single female heads of Black households, 75%. The men in our community have a tremendous job to do. And I'm not suggesting that some of us have to carry more than our share of the load. I'm saying that we have to make sure that we do indeed carry our load and bear the responsibility for our children's and for the mothers of our children. And Carmen McRae said, and I know this applies to your new marriage, that love should be like 2 trees that grow side by side, but not in one another's shadow. The fourth group are the people who are opposed to forward progress of Black people, and make no secret about it. And your responsibility as a servant leader, as Al and I have tried to demonstrate over many decades, is to organize the first group, educate the second, convince the second, educate the third, and remove from the path of our forward progress those members who occupy that fourth category, who are opposed to forward progress for the race. So Karinga said that sometimes victory means fewer defeats, and it's not going to be all rainbows and watermelon sunsets. But, if you think about that, sometimes victory means fewer defeats. We have to embrace that and make forward progress wherever we can. And I'm not just talking about the low-hanging fruit. I'm talking about the long-range work that you and Al and myself have been involved in. And I say that as an elder in training and an aspiring servant leader. Why? Because when I get weary, when I get tired, when I get lonely, I ask myself, Yusuf, have you got anything better to do? Okay. And the answer is no.
Nope.
Absolutely not.
This is why I'm here.
Keep on keeping on. Keep your back straight, go forward. And, I'm confident that you'll be at peace with yourself and in your marriage and in our community. So by all means, continue, sister. Okay, because you're tough. I have a nephew who says, God bless you the best. And as I said, we can sleep much easier knowing that there are those in your generation who either can be the light or can be the candle, share the light, or be the mirror that reflects it. So keep going, keep doing it. Sorry for rambling, brother.
No, I just, in your explanation, I think that is so apt and so needed for my generation to hear. And I just wish for folks in my generation to have the same type of guidance and strong mentors that I see in you too, and to hear your words, not just to me, knowing that it's going to go out makes me feel good too. Like, I'm not hoarding this info, y'all. Like, I'm so thankful that that you're sharing your insights and your wisdom.
The reality is that the members of your generation would much prefer to hear the information and the challenges and opportunities that we face. We don't have problems. We have challenges and opportunities. They would much prefer to hear it from a member of their generation rather than a member of ours. It's just a reality. And so it's important for you to continue to step up, to speak up, to be and do. And, we have very high expectations of you, sister, and I'm sure that Sam and Sheila do as well. So keep on keeping on. We're gonna make it.
Let me take a point of departure and ask you to talk about your mom and dad. We have said how phenomenal they are, but it'd be awesome to have you say what they are to you. And the idea from my point of view, Angela, is to always celebrate and be free in sharing the sense of legacy. And so, as I'm asking you to talk about your mom and dad, particularly, my intent beyond that is to talk about mothers and fathers and their children, and how we show up for each other and how we seek to and strive to and sometimes are effective in demonstrating, possibilities and potential. So let me sort of turn it over to you to talk about, reflect on your parents, if you're comfortable doing that.
Yes, no, I really appreciate giving me the opportunity to talk about Dr. Samuel Myers Jr. and Dr. Sheila Arts. My parents, I think about my parents' backgrounds. My parents came from, the different spectrums, opposite sides of the spectrums of the Black American experience, right? My dad grew up in Baltimore. He's a son of a HBCU president, right? My grandfather was the president of Bowie State, and he worked at Morgan. And so in Baltimore, so my dad grew up with, high expectations placed on him. Mm-hmm. And yet my mother, she grew up in deep Texas, East Texas.
Sheila Ards.
Yeah, Sheila Ards. She grew up in deep Texas during a time where there was still a lot of, racial animosity, segregation. And she grew up on in a space where she had to kind of rub two sticks together and make something, right? And she was able to go to college, and from college gain her PhD. And they both, my mom and my dad, they're joined together in their love of intellectual curiosity, and also in their love of our people. And so I kind of was raised in this space of appreciating and seeing, knowing how to navigate those elite Black, that's what Leslie says, those elite Black spaces, but also knowing how to acknowledge, see, and navigate those spaces of just regular Black folk. The question is, are you really good on any MLK Boulevard? That's a Beyonce and Jay-Z lyric. They said, we go on any MLK Boulevard. And that's, the goals that I seek. I hope to be continuously, accepted and comfortable and happy in Black spaces, and furthering those spaces so that our people don't have to always struggle, right? We can thrive and go beyond just surviving. And those were values that were definitely instilled in me by my parents, and just knowing how to be comfortable everywhere and to also use your mind, right? And the mind is the most valuable thing that you own. Beyond beauty, beyond money, your mind is the most valuable thing that you own.
And let me just add that both of your parents, Dr. Myers and Dr. Ards, have been employed at the Humphrey Institute. Your father is the Roy Wilkins Chair at the Wilkins Center in the Humphrey Institute on social justice and human relations, I believe. And your mother, Dr. Sheila Ards, also taught at the Humphrey Institute. And then she went to, I believe, Columbia, South Carolina.
Yes.
And she taught at, what was the name of the HBCU?
Benedict
College in Columbia, South Carolina. So they have made outstanding contributions. And your father continues to provide research and advocacy and data to community-based organizations in the Black communities of Minneapolis and St. Paul and the state of Minnesota. And your father, by training, is an economist, correct?
Yes.
But he's also a historian, and he also is just such an incredible, regular, down-to-earth brother. And your mother, a good sister, so you come from what the old folks used to call bottom peepers, okay? All the way back up the family tree. And we're certainly proud of everybody who has ascended from those ranks. So keep up the good work.
Angela, I think I saw you first at one of your father's events at the Humphrey Institute. It was one of his annual conventions or meetings. I can't remember the exact. I was on the panel. I was a presenter, but you were singing. If I'm correct, am I?
Oh, then I know what it was.
Do you
Yeah.
remember? You remember the event? He introduced you as an artist and singer, and you. I don't remember the song, but I remember the experience, and it was wonderful. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was at the Fourth World Conference, the
Mm-hmm.
Fourth World Conference to Remedies to Racial and Ethnic Economic Inequalities. Yes, I remember that.
It's
What
a
piece did
mouthful,
you?
Alan.
What piece did you do then? And what was the assignment for
I
you?
think I did Sitting by the Dock of the Bay,
Mm-hmm.
I did it with my high school a cappella group. And the funny thing is that I was there at the Fourth World Conference. I think I've attended almost all of the world conferences, but in the last one that was in Vitória, Brazil, I was able to help coordinate. And now we're planning for the sixth one, and hopefully that will be a hybrid model in South Africa. So that should be, yeah. And with my dad, there's open invitations to those as well.
I had considered and wanted to, but was not able to go to the one that was held, I think, in New Zealand or Australia, or is in both places. I think it was. You remember that one? Tell us about that one. The focus
Yeah.
was on Indigenous people
Yes.
in the Australian continent.
Yes. No. Having basically that one was in the Aboriginals were the original indigenous people to Australia and New Zealand. And if you were to look at a lot of the Aboriginal groups, they would look black, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so addressing needs of black indigenous people across the world, addressing inequalities in Australia and New Zealand, which have been held up as very progressive countries. And so that was a very fantastic. I don't particularly remember the conference. What I remember, of course, since I was a child, I remember this might not look so good on me, but I had kicked my grandma and I ran away during that conference.
Oh,
So
no.
to frame how old I was.
I had a chance to meet your grandfather, and he was an outstanding individual. Outstanding. Yeah.
And he was there for that conference, I believe, the one at the Humphrey Institute, the fourth annual. I think I met him there as well. Well, so, Angela, what's on your mind this week? We've put you in a situation here going down this personal memory lane, and thank you for being willing to share and for sharing what you have. Really appreciate it. Looking at the political landscape, what's on your mind? What are you thinking about? What is your group talking about? What's your social media cohort looking at right now?
Yeah, so a lot of actually, I'm trying to put a big push around getting people to the African Heritage Day on the Hill. That will be held by the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage tomorrow virtually on the noon hour. And I'm trying to today really just trying to let people know about the Council of Minnesotans for African Heritage. And, they were started in the 80s, and they advised the governor and the state legislators on legislation for African Americans and African heritage peoples in Minnesota. So it's so important when they host an event like this where we get to hear from legislators, we get to hear from community leaders what is on their mind, that we show up, because their power in being listened to by the governor is also in them showing their power of, look, we're right behind them. If SEMA says it, we're right there behind them, backing them up in lockstep. So that's what I'm trying to get out today. That's just like a building of a political power, which our community really needs to harness. Our political power, we have these organizations, we have these people who are doing work. Unfortunately, things do fall through the cracks. And a lot of times people don't hear about these types of events. Well, me today, I got all my homework done. So I'm going to take some time and spend time shouting from the rooftops, go to the African American Day on the Hill tomorrow.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up here, because we can push that message across our channels today and even tomorrow. And probably, I haven't committed to this yet, but more than likely we can live stream the event. If it's over the noon hour, it'll be in advance of our 1 o'clock program. And if it bleeds into that program, that would be great as well, because the issues are important, and the organization, the resource is a great resource that we need to both be aware of and engage, utilize, and to give it the support and strength it needs to support us as community.
Yes, I expect to see some conversations about the Crown Act, some conversations about no-knock warrants, and ending economic inequality in the state. But next week on this show, if you give me some time, I'll be more than happy to give an update on the major points that was raised as well.
Angela, do you want to explain the Crown Act to those people that might not be familiar with it?
Yeah, so the Crown Act actually has come around a couple of years. I've been brought up for a couple of years now, but has yet to be fully passed into law around the ending of discrimination based on job discrimination based on hair and how you wear your hair. So as you know, Black folk particularly have been deemed, and our hair has been deemed unprofessional in a lot of settings, particularly when it is kept, in our standards. Like, I was looking at locks, dreadlocks, and they are a lot to keep up. But yet still somebody can get fired for having dreadlocks, or not hired because of their hair presentation. So the Crown Act seeks to eliminate that sort of discrimination. And so this will give opportunities for folks who, these days they won't fire you for being Black, but they can fire you for being unkept, or, not having the image, particularly in service jobs, right? Public facing jobs, not having a proper image. Well, this is to say, well, our hair is professional. Our hair, as it grows out of our head, is beautiful. And maybe not as it grows out of our head, okay? How we make it, to be part of our expression and our style as part of our culture is beautiful and is professional.
There was also a young African-American male athlete who was at a competition, and his coach told him that he couldn't participate with his hairstyle, and literally forced him to cut his hair off before he could compete. I think it was a wrestling tournament or something similar. Mm-hmm. And there have been a lot of examples where people have had cornrows or had their hair up, or however, when they went for job interviews and never got to second base, even though their qualifications far exceeded the people who were eventually hired for the position, simply because the supervisors were so uncomfortable or unwilling to offer employment to someone who had a hairdo that they were incapable of implementing on their own head. But so the Crown Act, are you aware of any activity in the legislature or any discussions related to qualified immunity for law enforcement officers, which makes it very difficult to sue them for any violation of an individual's constitutional rights?
No, I'm not aware. I was actually just listening to an informational hearing just previous to getting on here, and they and it was in the area where that should have been brought up, but I haven't heard anything officially yet. And I do know that there's been some back and forth within the DFL right now. As you know, redistricting came out last week, and Melissa Lopez Franson, who's the DFL Senate Minority Leader, she's decided not to run.
And I think she's in District 46 in the southwest suburbs. Yeah,
she was paired with another Democrat older lats,
who she has endorsed.
Yeah, who she has endorsed. So she decided not to run. And there's been a lot of back and forth with Ryan Winkler, who's on the DFL House Majority Leader, and some of his legislation that's focused on recruiting and hiring police officers. There's been a little bit of political tension with that because he's running for Hennepin County Attorney. And some folks believe that he's putting some of this forward. And he hadn't talked to the chair of the Public Safety Legislative Committee, which is Carlos Mariani. So, it seems like there's been a lot coming out from surrounding some of these issues. But for ending qualified immunity, which has been at the top of the NAACP nationally, our list, it seems to have gotten lost in so much of this political back and forth.
We're joined by my friend and childhood classmate, Kamal King, attorney Kamal J. King. Brother Kamal, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Yeah, good to see you, man. And Angela and Yusef and I are sort of having a general conversation. As always, we don't plan these. We just get on and start talking. And we opened up talking about Angela, kind of embarrassing her a little bit, but praising her for what she is doing and how she presents, and just the confidence and the clarity. And Yusef, as always, brings a wealth of information and connectivity. But it's good to see you as well. You put a note as we were talking in the chat saying, Al, your story is also inspiring about my background. And I'll take a minute to do that right now, and you can help me, Kamal, because I think you and I come from the same neighborhood. I was actually born in Kansas City. And what I have written about being born in Kansas City, Angela, is that in 47, Black families had a choice of going to the General Hospital or not. So my parents chose not and took me and I think my older sister and maybe one brother under me to KU, Kansas University Medical Center, across the state line into Kansas City, Kansas, because their perception was that there was care with dignity. That perception did not exist. And I think there were horror stories about the general hospitals back in those days. And so I have always held that story as a protest story, where my parents protested the poor service, the lack of dignity that they as taxpayers experienced. I tell people that my parents were both immigrants to Kansas City. My mother immigrated from Sunflower, Mississippi. And on my mother's side, the story is that she and another sister, like all of them over a period of time, kind of escaped. They got on buses at night and waited on the highway, got on buses and went from Sunflower to Kansas City, kind of one by one or in small groups, until the whole family was able to get from Sunflower, where they were sharecroppers. They were sharecroppers in an area where at one point in time, their father had been, and their family had been, successful farmers and owners of farmland. And I'm not sure what the details of the story, but my sense of it is that systems, processes, whatever, ended up with them not being in ownership. I do know that their father, my grandfather, was murdered. The story is murdered by poison delivered by either another Black man or a Black and a white man who came with a drink of whiskey or something, and he took the drink as something, as an offer of friendship, and he died poisoned to death. Prior to that, the stories in the family go, he had been the victim of night riders who came to the homestead they had, demanded that he come out. One of the stories is that one of my aunts, you remember Aunt Cleo, I think, Kamal, told us about, and she was the oldest of their children, told us about walking out onto the front porch of this house. Now, I remember the house because I visited the house when I was like 5 years old, and saying, white folks, you're not going to kill my dad. You have to kill me first. And if you kill me, so what? You can't eat me. I don't know what that means, but that was that was a defiance. And my memory of the family stories suggests that they were able to sustain themselves out of gardening and out of the work they did as sharecroppers and hired hands, and that was part of the reason for the attempts on my grandfather's life. They were not, maybe uppity is the right word, self-sufficient, self-reliant, and people that didn't take low so easily and so quickly, and therefore they were a threat to the order, and therefore they met the response they did, and that is the murder of the man, and then the putting of the family in a position of weakness and of fear that had it sort of one by one immigrate under the cover of darkness out of Mississippi. My father is an immigrant because he is Cuban born, but of Jamaican parentage. And my grandfather and grandmother moved from Jamaica to Cuba looking for a better life at around the turn of the century. And that's where my dad was born in the 20s, early 20s, and all of his sisters and brothers, except for the youngest, were born in Cuba, Cubans. And then maybe when they were teenagers, the family moved back to Jamaica. I've seen records of the stories of Jamaicans who had left, going to Cuba in search of a better life, coming back broken, no money, starved, met with racist hostility in Cuba. They had the same experience of a number of Jamaicans who went to Panama. I have relatives that went to Panama at the turn of the century who were part of building the Panama Canal. And so there's a history of our people in and out of Jamaica into Cuba, into the Caribbean basin. When my father came here in the 40s, 45 during the war, he came to work on what they called the Victory Farms. I don't know if you knew, but he worked for a guy named Charlie McIntyre. McIntyre was a white guy who had mushroom and farms, and also had apple orchards, and was producing food for the marketplace, but also for the war effort, right? And a lot of Jamaicans or Caribbean people came to this country to work on these farms because the Americans were at war either in Europe or in Asia. So that's kind of my personal family story, Kamal. What I've done is gone to genealogy and through DNA to get a sense of the legacy, the lineage. And what I've discovered is that through my mother's DNA, my lineage is 99% Yoruba, today's Yoruba, Nigerian. And I think the same is true from my father's side, though my father's side veers, if you follow the patrilineal DNA, it leads up to Ireland, Europe, and Spain. And so that's kind of the story. I enjoy connecting, bringing people together who are related, who don't know each other, and it's a passion of mine. I encourage all of us to do it. I have a sense of mission in doing what I do. The mission is that I believe that out of the scriptures, the question was, the prophet looked in the desert and said, "Can these bones live again?" Right? And the story in Black theology is that the neck bone connected to and there's a song that talks about the reconstruction of the human. And I take that from a lesson and lecture from our friend, Brother Mahmoud Al-Qadi, Youssef, who talked about we have to remember. And of course you can say, what did I forget? Well, I remember. He said, no, I'm not talking about that. That's real. That's one level. But I'm talking about remembering that which was dismembered. And as a culture, as a people, as a history, as lineage, the intentional dismembering of the body of African people, technology affords us the opportunity to reconnect, to remember. And the remembering is the resurrection of who we are. In that resurrection, I believe, we come to know our authentic selves again. And we come to understand the primacy of our existence, the originality. You use the word aboriginal. Uh, that's not an accidental term. It has to do with this notion of the original inhabitants, and that's us, I believe, and all of the planet emanates from us. So that's what motivates me, excites me, what I dream about, think about is how do we connect with who we always were and who we will always be, and how all
Now,
of it folds into the moment. Yes, Yusef, go ahead.
which genealogical service did you use?
I've used two. I've used actually three. I started off with African ancestry, and I did that because it's Black owned, and I met Gina Page, Dr. Gina Page, and Dr. Rick Nettles. They were here at a conference some years ago at the University of Minnesota, and the question was, what does it mean? We were considering what does it mean for Black people to connect, and the dynamic was, will it change who we are and how we operate in America? Are we African Americans or Black Americans, or are we Africans? Is that connection real? And so it was a great debate. That's what introduced me to the question of genealogy. After that, I also used 23andMe. 23andMe comes out of, I think, the Mormons in Salt Lake, and I think 23andMe and Ancestry, I think, are merged. But both of them give different approaches and analyses. But my intent first was to do the business with Black folks, but also use other resources. So that's why I've chosen the two of them.
Mormons have the largest archive of data related to slavery and ownership.
Yeah.
That took place during the many sales and transfers of African people in this country.
Mm-hmm.
A very extensive archive, one of the largest on the planet. There's another one that deals with the cargo on slave ships. That's a fascinating archive. And there's a lecture on YouTube about slave ships, and the professor really did an outstanding job of sharing where Africans who were brought into this hemisphere were actually off-boarded and at what points in time. Mm-hmm. And only 3% of the Africans who came to this hemisphere were offloaded in America. And that
in
only
changed in North America, right?
Yeah, that only changed after the Haitian Revolution, when many of the plantation owners, after the liberation of Haiti, came to the United States to continue their business. And a lot of people don't realize that Haiti, under duress from the United States, France, and the United Kingdom, paid reparations to France because of the revenue that they lost when the slaves were freed. Mm-hmm. And on the 200th anniversary of the Haitian Revolution, I think it was 2004, the Haitians sent an invitation to the French premier or president, and he said, "Oh no, we can't come." He said, "It's too soon. The herd is still there, and we're not going to participate in your 200th celebration of the Haitian Revolution." But that was the only successful slave revolt in this hemisphere, and caused Napoleon to sell everything from the Canadian border to the Gulf of Mexico, from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, to the United States. It's called the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah.
Because he got whooped so bad in Haiti that he wanted to get out of this hemisphere completely and focus on his military exploits in other parts of the world. So we're actually living, at least in Minneapolis, in a part of the consequence of the Haitian Revolution, because it is west of the Mississippi. And Kamal, I'm not sure which side. I think you're east, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, as am I in St. Paul. Al and I are divided by the Mississippi here in the Twin Cities and Angela, but it's fascinating. When we talk about the continuum of African-American history and how, it began and continued and who the people were who ascended to leadership positions, it's really fascinating. And the genealogical piece, Al, we got to get you on Skip Gates' program, Finding Your Roots, because that family history is incredible, man, going from Jamaica through Cuba. And Garvey went to the Panama Canal and started his first newspaper because of the number of Panamanians who were dying from malaria, who were on the front lines with those shovels and picks, chopping away at those hillsides and shoveling that mud and being exposed to malaria. And all the other illnesses.
My grandfather and his family originate in St. Anne, in the same neighborhood as Marcus Garvey. So I can't imagine that they didn't have a connection at one level or another back then, so yeah.
I have a Jamaican 50-cent piece, and on the front of it is Marcus Mosiah Garvey, and I drilled a small hole in it and put it on my keychain, okay, so that every time I need to go somewhere in my car, I grab that keychain and I squeeze it, and I think about the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey.
And Kamal, you may not know this, but our office in North Minneapolis is the Marcus Garvey House.
Absolutely.
So that's the formal address of our building.
Al, my mom, I was born in Detroit, and
big Garvey country.
To a single woman who fell in love with a guy from Kansas City, and that's how I ended up in Kansas City. But from my earliest memories, and this program is kind of like what I always kind of lean toward. From my earliest memories, I always wanted to be around intelligent people. And I think that's what brought me to the Powells, because Burnell, your cousin, and y'all were always in the, at that time in the Kansas City, Missouri School District, they divided students, and they had a word for it, amongst the, the smart ones, the not so smart ones, and then tracking. Yeah. Well, I was in the middle track. Al and Burnell were on the higher track, but because they were on the higher track, I always kind of like veered toward those people, and that's how I met Burnell and Al. And what I remember about Big Al, who we call Big Al, which is Al's dad, was that, he worked at the slaughterhouse, I believe. Yep. And that's how you guys ended up in Minnesota when they shut the slaughterhouses in Kansas City and moved them up north. But he had a store. He had the community store. And I mean, it served our community, a little grocery store that really served our community. And his mom, Maxine, who's still living as of last week, she was just a go-getter. And the Powells, the family of the Powells, his Burnell's dad was an entrepreneur also, owned a barbershop, pool hall, and cleaners in the community. And Burnell's twin brother Bernard was a community activist. I mean, he was the community activist to the extent that before he was assassinated, he received the Jefferson Award from the Supreme Court of the United States for community activities. And this was in the late 70s. This is in the late 70s. So my connection has always been trying to be around intelligent people. And so when I got on today and I heard you guys talking, about Angela's parents, I felt very much at home, Angela. And I know, as Yusuf said, that apples don't fall far from the tree, and that not only that, but we don't come out of a vacuum. We don't come out of a vacuum. There's always foundational pieces. When Bernard, Al's cousin, Burnell's twin, was killed, Al's mother went to work putting together a foundation so that he could have a statue. And we talk about these statues that go up of all these Confederates. Well, across the street from the powerhouse in Kansas City, which is at 2803 Brooklyn, right in the middle of the Black community, there is a huge statue of Bernard
And fountain.
and a fountain.
Wow.
That Al's mother was intent and hell bent on getting it built, and it's standing there today. It's in a beautiful park. The park has been it's just a beautiful park. It's been renovated. So Al has not fallen far from the tree. You know, his dad, although he was a worker in the meat packing district, he owned his own business. And the same way with Al. One other story I'm gonna tell you about Al. Al and his mom, you know, Al, we went to grade school together, but when it came time to go to high school, the same way that she went to Kansas to have Al, she sent Al to Westport, which was supposed to be the best high school in Kansas City. So she was always maneuvering. I don't know what her educational background was. I don't think she went to college. I don't think
She did not.
Went to college, but she valued education, and that's where Al went to high school. So I'm gonna kind of let it go there.
No, thank you. That gives me like such a great context for, Al McFarlane, but also for you, Mr. King. And it makes me think about the Combahee River Collective, in which they say like the personal is political. And it's so crucial and so important for us as a community to hear different stories about different people who have shaped and who are in our community, because that history, although so personal to us, you see how people have navigated. And Mr. Yusuf gave this, the navigation of political dynamics of even just how and why we're here, the navigation of racial trauma and racial violence just to come to Minnesota to experience, a better life. And then also in Minnesota to also have these different political and racial tensions that we're coming to. So it's so crucial to see and hear and ground us in our history, in our personal histories, but also in our cultural history that's not, 7 leagues, below the sea or, way up here. But also just to see that we truly are carrying our ancestors' legacies. And it's so beautiful to hear it and to see it and to just be able to be in witness with everybody else.
And the slaves used to say, capture knowledge, fly to freedom.
Yeah. Can I also say that because we were in segregated schools in Kansas City, I benefited from segregated schools. Unlike today, where if Black people have sufficient funds, their children are unlikely to go to the public schools. But in the 50s and 60s, I went to school with the doctors, the lawyers' kids, all the professionals we were in the same community, and we ended up going to the same school. Therefore, I got an opportunity because I was friends with them to move to see into homes that I would never have been able to see in. And I can still think of some of the doctors' homes that I went into as a kid that, wow. And, some of the designs of my home today come from what I saw back then. So segregation wasn't all bad.
That's what my dad says, actually, because he went to a Black school and he went to an HBCU. My grandfather went to an HBCU. I've definitely benefited from HBCUs. I'm only here. I could only go to an Ivy League school now because of the work that my ancestors did going to HBCUs. But my dad said, it was Black history a month every day.
Every day. Yeah.
It wasn't a special day that you carved out learning about Charles Hamilton Houston or W.E.B.
Right.
Boys.
Every
building
minute
that you walked into was named after them.
Every minute. Yeah.
You know, what I remember
graduating from the University of Missouri, I ran to Howard Law School as fast as I could get there.
I remember Kamal. We went to Central Junior High School, and I don't know if you had Mrs. Soligo for 7th grade or Mrs. English for 8th grade, but Mrs. English was a Black English teacher, and had vocabulary cards all around her classroom with just words, and she drilled us every day and taught us to be fascinated with understanding and knowing the meaning of the words. So after 8th grade, as Kamal said, I transferred to Westport High School in my freshman English class, had the same vocabulary cards around the room.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the meaning of every word. The white kids didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so the teacher wanted to impress 2 Blacks in my class, me and a sister named Marshawn Fields. I don't know if you knew her.
Yeah.
Marshawn and I were in the class together. And they
Mr. Fields' daughter.
Dr. Fields' daughter, right? Yeah.
Right. Dr. Fields, right.
When they started asking who knew any of these words, I knew them all. And they wondered, how you knew this. You're the Black kid, and these are a bunch of white kids that are supposed to be advanced. Point I'm making is that our school prepared us.
Right.
And Mrs. English prepared us to say, here's what you do. Here's how you use this language to navigate the culture. And you can be miles ahead and above ordinary people that think they know something and they don't. And so treasure the language, treasure this. And I think that meant a lot to me. That, along with the experience come out of my dad requiring me to read the newspaper to him. I used to sit at the kitchen table and read the daily paper or the Sunday paper. And 2 things happened. One, I learned to read better, but he would always comment on my ability to enunciate and to articulate, and to hear that praise from him meant the world to me. To know that my father thought I sounded good meant everything. So it made me want to sound better and better and better. So I remember that now. And I know that I have this love affair with language and with the word that is the basis for all the work. And Brenda's backstage. Brenda, jump on here. Bring Brenda in. Kamal, you haven't seen Brenda in a while.
Hey, lady.
Hello, Brenda.
That's another one of the houses I got into.
Brenda and I were in kindergarten together in Kansas City. Brenda, good to see you. So let me bring her in this conversation because you're the witness and the activist as well. Brenda, how you doing? You have to bring your camera down a little bit too and unmute your mic. There we go. Perfect. And Angela, we all grew up together in Kansas City. But like I said, Brenda and I were in kindergarten together. We were in kindergarten in a dance hall because the school we were going to go to got torched because they didn't want Blacks to come to that school. And it took some time to have the place fixed. I'm not sure if it was the same year or the next year before we went to D.A. Holmes. But yeah, Brenda, can you remember?
She's trying to turn her microphone back on.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we might miss that. But this memory is wonderful. Just having these conversations.
And it's a lesson. It's a lesson about, there were some areas particularly where Black-centered focus on education. And that's, I think, in a lot of ways, we're still returning to that Black-centered focus and knowing that in our community, we have everything we need, just like in our bodies, we have everything we need to survive and to thrive and to grow together in our community, and we can find it in our community. It's just the logic of integration, yes, in a lot of ways was an economic logic because Black schools were so underfunded in a lot of ways. But unfortunately, socially, the logic became white is right. the white way of education is, right? Well, that wasn't the foundational logic of what our, the NAACP and people were trying to do. We were trying to get kids funding, right? Get kids into schools where they will thrive, into spaces where they would thrive. And so it's very unfortunate that the logic has changed.
Brenda, jump in here.
I just want to tell Angela, we were very adamant about being members of the NAACP. And our parents, most of them were lifelong members, and they worked really hard for the organization. But I think the strength in the Santa Fe area that we grew up in was the fact that we were interconnected. And that's what the governor talked about yesterday in his interview. And I have to brag on my boss. He did a phenomenal interview with Governor Walz. And I thought I wrote a pretty good piece about it. It was just deep. And I just remember the political organizations that our parents were so passionate about. They had the 28th Street Club and the Brooklyn Club, and Christmas. One neighborhood had all candles, and another one, Kamal, you remember the stars on 29? I mean, it was just wonderful memories about how our parents appreciated God in life. It was just there. And with our teachers, they were so inspiring. I will never forget Grace Kirkpatrick and her cologne and her Hartsfield suits. I mean, they cared about them. I loved Grace Kirkpatrick
and her aspirin and Coke every morning.
I know. I know. It was
she
great.
Was a little high. She took an aspirin and Coke every morning.
And Kamal, I will tell you about Al's cousin. Bernard would stretch out paper clips, and he would weave them in my braids. And I would be walking down the hall of D.A. Holmes, and my braids were going out like this, and everybody was laughing. And that was Bernard. Yeah. But wonderful memories. Wonderful memories.
We're running out of time, but I just want to.
We can take more time. We're good.
Yeah, I just want to share this book. My son gave this to me for Christmas. Raise a Fish, Take a Knee. Mm-hmm. Can y'all see that?
Yep.
Yeah, it's about the race and the illusion of progress in modern sports. And with what's going on in the NFL today is very apropos. Yeah, so Raise a Fist, Take a Knee. And it's by John Feinstein. If you listen to public radio, he's the commentator on public radio. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm reading, this conversation actually reminded me of this book. It's a novel, Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, but it's a novel about a family legacy told through women, right? So, and so it's a thick one, I would say. It's a big Odyssey type novel, but it goes through generations upon generations of Black family, particularly in the South, and also Native connections too of that Black family. And this is a wonderful book that I'm enjoying reading.
I'm reading a book by Eddie Glaude Jr. Is It Nation Time? Contemporary Essays on Black Power and Black Nationalism, that has an incredible array of critical Black analysts assessing the Black Power, Black Nationalism generation and its contributions. Eddie Glaude Jr. Is It Nation Time? I put it in the chat box.
Okay.
I try to read several books at one time.
Mm-hmm.
I always have some Richard Wright on my reading table because my name comes from a Richard Wright novel, my surname. And it just takes me, it's like getting on a spaceship and going to another planet when I read Richard Wright. I mean, it's just incredible. The Outsider, Long Dream, White Man Listen, his
Black
short
Boy.
stories, Black Boy. American Hunger, which was the Black Boy, was his the Book of the Month Club, his autobiography. They cut it off at the point where he left Mississippi and went to Chicago and said he was going to plant his soul in the warmth of another sun, which the woman who wrote the book about Black migration,
Carol Anderson,
Isabel Wilkerson, used that.
Wilkerson,
and so did Ta-Nehisi Coates in his book, drew from a Richard Wright poem, Between the World and Me. And American Hunger was his essay on communism that was really fascinating and talking about the Black community in Chicago in the 1930s and 40s. And I looked in the New York Times archives this week and saw that Thurgood Marshall was providing information to the FBI on communists who were trying to infiltrate the NAACP so that he could keep the NAACP from coming beneath the hammer of the FBI, because they were investigating him and all of the Black civil rights organizations back in the 1950s. But those are all excellent choices. I'm going to have to look them up.
Yeah.
So I'm reading the book Cast, and I think, Kamal, you had talked to me about reading this just recently, so I got it. And I'm also reading, and like you, Yusef, I'm getting in the habit of having 4 or 5 books open at one time and reading 10 minutes here, half an hour there. But everywhere in my house, I've got open books where I left off. Reading for a book club on narrative. The Nubia, I talked about that before, but that's a web experience being put together by Dr. Greg Carr, who's the head of Africana Studies at Howard University, in collaboration with Sister Dr. Karen Hunter. And they have a project called Narrative. And we've been reading up through last Monday as part of a book club. The book club meets Mondays like at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock. And this last book they read was The Souls of Black Folks. And they took it over three weeks, 3 Mondays, and did it about a third at a time. But I've also been reading this book and a couple others by this brother named Ronoko Rashidi, who recently transitioned into ancestorship. But he, in this book, Black Star, the African presence in early Europe, it's one of a series where he talks about Blacks in antiquity in different places around the world. Well, listen, this has been a good conversation. As always, I thank all of you for being here. And let's do it again next week. And I love talking about the books. That's a good thing. Let's make that a habit where we can push each other to read and talk about what we're reading.
Absolutely. Right. Be safe.
And I've been listing them at the end of articles too, so other people can refer to them.
Yeah, super. I'm plowing through it.
I bet.
So it's a deep dive, ain't it, brother?
I'm too busy writing.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Take care. We'll see you next week.